Greetings. This is Paul the Poke from PaulthePoke.com. Welcome. We're about a week out from Purim next weekend, uh, 5784 traditional Hebrew calendar 2024 on our Western Gregorian calendar. And we're just going to recap the scripture that tells us about the celebration that is Purim. Esther 9, verses 20 through 22. Then Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month, Adar, and the 15th day of the same month, annually, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies. And it was a month which was turned for them from sorrow into gladness and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing and sending portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. And that's the theme of Purim. So this year, celebration is to take place again in the Hebrew month of Adar on the 14th and the 15th day. Now, in our Gregorian year of 2024, the events start on sundown, Saturday, March 23rd, and ends the next day on Sunday, March 24th. Scripture tells us, again, the holiday is to be celebrated annually. So, Esther 2, verse 16, and when Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So there we have a time marker. We can pin this down as to when this took place historically. And essentially, it's Haman, a Persian, wanted to eliminate the Jewish people. And it's a real historical event because we've got time markers and it's documented. And this is the setting that's in the book of Esther. Now, the events of the story take place from roughly 483 to 473 BC. And that's one thing I've learned doing this over the course of years. A man's ability to mark time. It's not going to be exact. I mean, it's going to be loose, approximately about 483 to 473. You're going to be off a year here, a year there, and you're looking for a corroboration of events that point to a specific point in time. And that's not always as simple as it seems. The location is Susa, Shushan of the Persian Empire. So this would be modern day Iraq or Iran. My bad. History knows King Ahasuerus as Xerxes I, and so this is a picture of the Persian Empire around 500 BC. Here's the setting in Susa, and that gives you an idea of the land that was occupied by the Persian Empire. I'm sure you can get some other maps, and there would be some difference and some variance. We don't know for sure who wrote the book of Esther. Jewish tradition holds Esther was written by Mordecai. Okay, so again, and let's get a view of this modern day map of Iran. We're going to be looking at some specific places. Okay, so Tehran, the capital in the north. Zoom in just a little bit. Naksh Erostam is the burial place of Xerxes or Ahasuerus. So we're going to want to know where that is. Scroll down a little further, start getting some names of places. Bashir, nuclear site, significant nuclear site off the Persian Gulf in Iran. That's important. We're going to go north. Hamadan. This is where Esther and Mordecai are buried. Also, this is home to an airbase, an Iranian airbase and they've allowed the Russians to come in and park some jets and so forth, some resources. So just to give you, there, right there, this little bend in the road is where Hamadan is. So just to give you a little bit, modern day Iran, these are the things we're looking at. So Hamadan, Bashir, uh, Tehran, and then Xerxes or Ahasuerus is buried here in this location. So a lay of the land, if you will, which takes us to the next question. So whatever happened to Xerxes and Persia after these events, probably better stated, is during these events in the Bible. At the least, history tells us Xerxes' attention was clearly divided during the time period of Esther. Xerxes followed Darius in 485 BC. I think it had been about 5 years prior to that. Darius just got smoked by the Greeks in roughly 490. So naturally, Xerxes was going to reclaim Persian glory from the Greeks, and he wanted to conquer all of Greece. Now, Xerxes' plans did not work out well either, and the Greeks essentially destroyed the Persians in 479 BC. And this pretty much ended any ambition Xerxes had planned. Also slowed the Persians down for many years after the Greeks pretty much worked them in about a 12 year period. And Xerxes eventually was assassinated by servants in 464 BC. And I get this from the Heart of Hebrew History, H.I. Hester, page 301. Is a book written in 1949 out of William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. So went on a little historical hunt for some of this stuff, and ended up in places just didn't think were going to happen. So it was kind of very interesting to learn about. King Xerxes, again, was not buried with his queen, Esther. He was buried in Naqsh Rostam, or Rostam, outside of modern-day Shiraz, Iran. And so this is always fascinating. There's what secular history, human history, thinks is important. I remember studying this story, not Esther, but the battle between the Greeks and the Persians back in school. This was a defining moment in Western civilization that the Greeks turned back the Persians. And so, the Greeks were hailed as wonderful. It kept, Middle Eastern culture from expanding westward, and eventually allowed for Western thought to flourish was the thing we were taught back in the day. And then there's what God sees as important in history. And it's about God's chosen people. That's what's important. They were spared. Esther 9, verses 3 through 4, and all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. And eventually, in Esther 10, verse 3, for Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews and highly favored by his many kinsmen, seeking the good of his people and speaking peace to all his countrymen. And as far as God's concerned, it's more about the preservation of his people, the Jewish people surviving. At this same time, Persia, was the most powerful empire on the planet, and they were in decline. They'd been worked by the Greeks during this same, there's about a 12 year time period where, the balance of power was turning in historical secular history. All the while, God's more concerned about the preservation of his people, the Jews. And historical evidence shows that it was Queen Esther and Prime Minister Mordecai who were buried together. Today in the 21st century, that's in Hamadan, is home to the tombs of Esther and Mordecai. And we've written about this, going back several years. You can click on this link for several of the stories going back in and around events related to Purim. And I think it was a few years ago, there were factions within Iran trying to destroy these tombs. But they're on the UNESCO or one of those UN historical watches. And so they haven't messed with it for whatever reason. I'm sure they could if they wanted, really committed to the cause. And they may do that at some point too. But all that being said, what's important to God is that the Jewish people were ultimately preserved and spared, and God always has a remnant of his people. So appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with others. PaulthePoke.com. If you're not a subscriber, type in your email address here, hit subscribe. Something will be sent out to you every time we put something up. WordPress has been very good about keeping emails, not selling that information. I've not had any complaints, so that's good. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Wishing you a good weekend. See ya. Bye.